What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Suit Hine Show. Today is July 22nd, 2021, and in this episode, I'm joined by Tony Gazza. How you doing today, Tony?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing really good. Thanks for joining the show. We have so much to talk about. Just a day or so ago, the NBA Finals ended, and it was a very, very intriguing Finals. I mean, there's lots of wrestling news to talk about that I don't think anybody expected just a week ago that would be happening. That could really change the wrestling product as we know it. And talking before we started recording, about the Bucks winning the title in the NBA. So we'll go ahead and start with that topic. What are your thoughts on the whole NBA Finals and the Bucks ending up winning 6 games?
Yeah. So first, I just want to congratulate Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Milwaukee Bucks, as well as the great city of Milwaukee, for winning that championship, first championship in 50 years. Because they fought through adversity and they were down 0-2 coming back home. And then I think Game 3 was really the beginning of the end for the Suns. But we'll address that later. But Giannis has officially joined the conversation. If that was one of the greatest single final games in history, 50 points, 14 boards, 5 blocks, 17 to 19 from the free throw line, and overall shot 62% in this series. And it's one of those things where if the Suns had a moment to seize the opportunity, it was Game 6 because Holiday and Middleton shot 10 of 32 combined from the field. So that's one of those games where it's all on Giannis' shoulders. And if they build the wall like they said in the lane and put the ball in Middleton or Drew's hands, they wouldn't win Game 6. Suns would force a Game 7, point blank period. Another thing, this loss can't be put on Scott Foster. Okay? Although CP3's 0-13, there was no late time call to be made. So essentially, his hands are clean. But it's one of those things where DeAndre Ayton played small. He looked like a guard out there. 12 points and 6 boards. For crying out loud, Pat Connaughton came off the bench, had 8 boards compared to his 6. Jay Crowder had double the rebounds than DeAndre Ayton. Now, Ayton is a tremendous talent, but Giannis ate his lunch. He showed glimpses in the series versus the Clippers, but overall, Monte Williams is at fault. He failed to look at the Miami Heat and Toronto Raptors game tape. Reason is, if you eliminate Giannis, right, he starts to play out of character, gets frustrated, start running people over in the lane. So it's one of those situations where if they just did a zone defense, I think, honestly, this series would have been Suns in 7.
And to me, I feel like the basically disappearance of CP3 had a major factor in the Suns' just downfall, of this finals. Game 1, he was great. 2, 3, 4, 5, he was nowhere to be seen type of deal. Game 6, the final game of the series, he stepped up. But at that point, it's just a little too late type of deal. Devin Booker had back-to-back 40-point games. I don't know what more do you want from Devin Booker.
Mm-hmm.
What I said with CP3 is kind of a very similar situation with DeAndre Ayton. The first couple games, he was, fantastic. But at the same time, that's when Giannis was not 100% healthy. And the Suns basically allowed Giannis to get healthy. And then when you have a healthy Giannis, and then all of a sudden Ayton is just doing horrible, not playing nearly as good as he did earlier into the series. This series to me was just very interesting because, like, Giannis, I feel like if obviously if it wasn't for injuries, neither one of these teams would have been in the finals. Them playing the Lakers and the Nets and everything. But I feel like I feel like a couple years from now, we're going to look back and say, despite not playing a great team in the finals like the Suns, this was one of the better performances we've seen actually in NBA history with Giannis, because he's the first player in NBA history in a final series to average over 30 points, over 10 rebounds, over 5 assists, and shoot 60% from the field. That's the first player in NBA history in the finals to do that. Yeah. And, I mean, we've seen what guys like LeBron and Kobe have done in the finals, and the fact that he's the first player ever really shows how valuable he was, to the Bucks. I mean, he's just 26 years old, and, I mean, he's Finals MVP, has won the MVP twice. After this, I really think this really helps his case for a top 3 or top 5 player type of situation. And also with the Bucks, having Chris Middleton and Holiday finally step up. They're inconsistent the first couple games. That's really why they weren't able to win. When CP3 and Ayton and Booker, all those guys are playing great, and the only guy who's actually playing good is a Giannis who's not 100%. Yeah. Then you get CP3 not playing great. Ayton's playing horrible. Then finally Holiday and Middleton step up. It was very difficult for the Suns to come back. And, I kind of mentioned, Giannis being, after this, I really think this cements him as one of the top players in the league. He already is. But, after this, finals performance, really historical performance in a way, do you think Giannis would be a top 5 player in the NBA now?
I think he already is. Going into this season, he is number 2 in my books, behind Kevin Durant, and then LeBron James number 3 behind Giannis. It's just one of those things where he's been so disrespected his entire career. 2 years ago, I put a video out saying Giannis Antetokounmpo was steps away from being the league's best player. I got absolute shit on. People were calling me, retarded. They said, excuse my language, but this is true. Look in the comments. These people were going at me for saying, my opinion, and look at it now. People say James Harden is a better player than Giannis, but only one of them has a championship and a finals MVP. So at me, please. But that's one of those things where he has addressed the free throws. He has restructured his shot. Obviously, he came into the league, no jump shot. He's steps away from being the league's best player. Obviously, it's Kevin Durant's league now, but people just disrespect him, and it makes me sick and tired of it, because can you respect greatness for once? Like, when someone accomplishes something, can you just give it up? Can you just say, you know what, good for you, man. You did great. You earned it. You worked your ass off for it. But people still want to hate. People still want to give him shit, and it's just ridiculous.
And, I'm not going to lie, I do not like LeBron or, Tom Brady at all. But, I definitely, respect their greatness and the fact, like, we're never going to see those type of players again in our generation. Those are the type of guys who are once-in-a-lifetime, players we're not going to see hardly ever. And, with Giannis, to me, as a top 5, I think he's just in the top 5, 4 to 5 type of situation, because in no particular order, like, I'm not a huge NBA guy, but in no particular order to me, 1, 2, and 3 are LeBron, Durant, and Curry. Number 4 and 5, it's interesting. I would have to put Luka up there and Giannis. I think they're debatable for 4 and 5, but I think he has to be a top 5 player now. And I know some people don't think he is, but what more do you want type of deal? He's 26. He's already won 2 MVPs. He just won a finals MVP. Yeah. When we have some guys like Harden, who still hasn't won a championship, and type of deal, I feel like there's no more debating and there's no more arguing to saying he's not one of the best players in the league. Mm-hmm. I feel like if they would have got swept, and if he would have kind of not played great like he did game 1 and game 2, if they were not able to win the finals, then I feel like you can make a case he's not one of the top 5 players in the league. But after performance we've seen, this past couple weeks, a historic performance, one of the better ones in NBA history, I think it's just too hard to debate, in my opinion, that he's not a top 5 player. He's shown that he clearly is. And in a year or so, I wouldn't be surprised if he might even be ending up the best player in the whole NBA.
Yeah, absolutely. I could see that happening for him. But, it's just one of those things where you look at it, it's amazing how they accomplished this, because with that scary MCL, ACL injury, when his leg just looked like it was done, he came back, persevered through that. And then, not to mention, people forget, Mike Budenholzer was on the line. If they lost that series, he would have been fired. So it's just one of those things where, they struck when the iron was hot, and, they are champions now. And not to mention, Giannis Antetokounmpo's brothers are champions as well. So that family legacy is definitely going to be, submitted for history,
Yeah, I feel like something else, like we kind of talked about it before the show, but if the Nets were healthy, there was no chance the Bucks were going to be in the finals.
Yeah.
And this is the type of deal where, like, This is the one chance the Bucks can be in the finals. Do not mess it up, because if you mess it up, people are going to be hating on Giannis for years and years and years to come. Like, for instance, LeBron's horrible performance in Dallas in the finals years ago. People won't let down those type of situations, in big time moments. But this is not going to happen often for the Bucks when so many teams are just unhealthy, like 76ers. The Celtics were injured up a little bit too. But you have one chance to go to the finals, and people are starting to doubt you going down 2-0, and then you win 4 straight. Nobody expects you to win 4 straight, in my opinion. And then you play just lights out. Probably some of the best ball you've ever played. He's not really a great free throw percentage shooter, but I think it was like 16 to 17, 17 to 18, something like that in Game 6. Absolutely crazy. Yeah. And to me, this really shows that there's no denying he's a top 5 player. If they would have lost, I think that could be debatable. But after his just amazing performance in this finals, he's definitely cementing himself as a top player in the league. And I think he's going to be a great player, and he's only going to get better. Like, if he can get a better 3-point shot, maybe shooting like 35, 38%, something like that, then we're talking about easily the best player, in my opinion, in the NBA for years to come.
Absolutely. 100% agree with you. And it would be interesting to see if, Giannis can take him back, because the East is the least. So, if it's a cakewalk, like Skip Bayless says, it'd be interesting to see if he could take him back. Now, obviously, Steve Nash said it, the Brooklyn Nets being, depleted, which they really weren't. You still had Kevin Durant and James Harden. It blows my mind that they call that depleted. Are you serious? No, LeBron James working with Matthew Dellavedova and the other guy, Timothy Mozgov, that's depleted. Don't give me that the Brooklyn Nets, had a sob story, because they didn't. Come on, man. You had Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan, James Harden, Kevin Durant, and hindered Kyrie Irving, and you're still saying you're depleted. Honestly, I think it's just an excuse. If you can't win, greatest shot of the year by Kevin Durant, point blank period. But if you can't win, then at the end of the day, that shows that you need a stacked team. Like, you're going to do a Golden State Warriors. You're going to have, 4 all-stars, stacked bench. It's not really authentic in my view. When LeBron did it, it was cool, because it was the first time we really saw it. But after a while, it just kind of got irritating in a way. It's just like, hey, man, what happened to competing against each other? I'm all for it. Like, if you want to do it in Tokyo, Team USA, 100%, I'm all for it. But when you start calling the boys up and start playing, like street ball, it defeats the purpose of competing. Just like Larry Bird versus Magic Johnson. Those rivalries are, you can't remake those. Those are special. And, what are you going to put? Like, Steph Curry versus LeBron as the best rivalry of this generation? Probably. Besides that, who do you have? Everyone else is just super teams.
And exactly. And to me, not playing against 100%, healthy Nets team does not take away the Nets, like you mentioned, still had so many great players. DeAndre Jordan and Griffin are not what they used to be, but you're still having Harden and Durant, 2 top 10 players in the league, who just, in typical Harden fashion, he just disappeared, in the playoffs, and Durant did everything he could. But, this was just a historic performance by the Bucks and Giannis. I'm very, very interested to see how they come back next season. And, one team I am extremely interested in next season is the Phoenix Suns. They, losing 4 straight games in the NBA Finals, that has to suck. You're so close. You just got to win 2 more, and then you just basically blow it. But what do you think could be next for Phoenix?
I don't think they re-sign Chris Paul, or Chris Paul re-signs there. That's just my personal belief. He shows abilities of a superstar still, but those are dwindling fast. His first finals appearance in his career. So do you really want to put, all your eggs in one basket in Chris Paul?
I wouldn't. Not at all. Because he's 36 years old, and he's good, but he can't carry a team. He can't win a game by himself. He's not that type of. He's not a scorer. You have to have a top NBA scorer, in my opinion, to win. And I know they had Booker having back-to-back 40-point games, but if I just have CP3 and Booker, I don't feel confident winning a finals or even honestly getting to the finals, especially in the West.
Yeah, and the Wild West is definitely tough. Especially you got people forget about Denver. They're dangerous, especially with the full healthy Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic coming off an MVP season. They're lethal, and especially you got LeBron James, Anthony Davis with a full 150-day offseason. You got the Utah Jazz with Spida and Rudy. I mean, it's stacked. And then not to forget young Memphis with Ja Morant. So I mean, it's a shootout.
And I feel like this was the Suns' one chance to win in the finals. And kind of similar to the Bucks. I mean, you have with all those injuries, now is your chance. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and then you just blow it, which just sucks for CP3. And you kind of mentioned him earlier, which honestly I don't see the Suns being nearly as good next season because honestly I don't even see CP3 being on the team next year. He has a player option worth $44 million, which to me is just absolutely ridiculous. That's over $500,000 in a regular season game for a guy who's going to be 37 next season, who I know, he was a big part of Phoenix's success, but he's not a top scorer by any means. Unfortunately, to me, I feel like this is just obvious. I would be shocked if it didn't happen. CP3 would decline his player option and sign with the Lakers to play with LeBron, get a championship next season, and then retire right off to the sunset. I mean, he gets his ring his last season, cements himself as one of the best point guards of all time. Honestly, to me, it makes just so much sense, and it would shock me if that did not happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's been rumors swirling around that the Banana Boat crew could, unite in Los Angeles. I mean, Carmelo Anthony's I believe he's a free agent. Don't hold me to the fire if he's not. But there's always been talks of Melo, Bron, and CP3, the boys getting back together, winning a championship. And I think it's possible, but I mean, is that what the Lakers front office wants? Is that what Jeannie Buss and Rob Pelinka want? I don't think so. I think what they're going to go for is go all in. Try to get yourself, because Dennis Schroeder's not going to get the max. Let's be honest. He wants $105 million. You can get that somewhere else, guy. You're not getting it from us. So I don't care about that. We need to get Russell Westbrook, who's a UCLA native, or we go out and we get us a Damian Lillard. Obviously, video surfaced of Lillard and LeBron James dapping up. But it's one of those things where why would you go and get yourself a tier 2 or tier 3 player when you can go get yourself a tier 1 player? You get where I'm coming from? Why would you extort your resources? And everyone, I believe, is a restricted free agent or unrestricted. I mean, the list goes on. I think the only guy we have secured is THT, but I mean, we should bring back Alex Caruso. But it's one of those things where Markieff Morris is gone, Dudley's gone. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Schroeder's gone because we're not giving him the max. So we're going to have a total rebuild. Montrezl Harrell's gone. So I just don't think that those core players meshed well because it takes, like Aaron Rodgers said, every group of guys is special. So when the Lakers won in that bubble, those guys have been on that team. JaVale McGee was on that team for 2 years when Lonzo Ball and Josh Hart was there. I mean, Rondo was there during those times. I mean, they had chemistry. And Rajon Rondo was one of the – I'd say he was the third best player in that series. And they let him go. They let him walk. Why? I would have kept Rondo because he can set up the half-court offense and put guys in the right place. But, I mean, I just think it was just on paper they upgraded. But on film, complete downgrade because, with Marc Gasol even, I mean, it was one of those things where Dwight Howard knew his role. And Marc Gasol wanted to be, he wanted to be in the lineup. And then when we got Drummond, it caused a lot of turmoil. So it's one of those things where you need to know your role. So I'm just interested to see where not only the Lakers, I know we went off tangent, but where CP3 goes. I mean, does he go to LA? Does he? I mean, no one knows. So we just sit back and watch and see.
And you mentioned Andre Drummond. That's somebody else who, in my opinion, I don't see him going back to the Lakers because he was
No.
just a complete bust. You know,
Oh yeah.
I like the Cavs and I like the Celtics, and I was really happy when the Cavs traded to get Drummond. And if you're not a NBA, if you're not a guy who watches the NBA a lot, you think Andre Drummond would be great. But to me, I feel like Andre Drummond is just like the ultimate stat pattern. He's going to get you 12 points, 12 rebounds, something like that.
Yep.
You
He'll
actually
get you a
watch
double.
half of his rebounds are his missed shots layup type of deal. Like he's not nearly as good as what people think. But you mentioned Westbrook and Lillard. I just feel like the whole Lillard situation is ridiculous. And with Westbrook, I mean that would just be strange to me seeing him like his third or fourth team in like 4 seasons. His with his contract, I think that would be harder. The thing with CP3 though is that if he declines his player option, he's going to have he'll sign. He's not going to get 40 with the Lakers. He might take a pay cut just to try to get a ring. And you mentioned Westbrook because UCLA, and I know this sounds crazy, especially how injury prone he is. I don't think it's going to happen. But somebody, I think maybe the Lakers, if they get a ton of cap space somehow, it's Kevin Love. And I know I sound crazy, but
I'm with you.
LeBron. He has the same agent as LeBron. He also played UCLA, just like Russell Westbrook did. He has a house he owns in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. So I think Love to the Lakers, I doubt it will happen. But I think it maybe should be talked about more than actually could. And with CP3, if he takes a pay cut, because I don't see CP3 getting a big contract, especially if he goes to a winning team. Because it's type of a deal, give me a 1-year deal, give me a cheap contract. I'm only here because I want a ring type of situation. And then you get Kevin Love. I mean, to me, all of a sudden, the Lakers, I mean, they're one of the finals favorites next season. Mm-hmm. But if let them stay healthy and you get CP3, they have to be the finals favorites. And I don't think that'll happen, but I think that needs to be talked about more than it actually is.
Yeah, and that's the one thing with Kevin Love actually is a great fit. 3 and D, that's what the Lakers are missing. The 3 ball. I mean, the guys that they brought in, I mean, I think Kentavious Caldwell-Pope will be back just because of Rich Paul, obviously. But it's one of those things where Michael Rappaport said that they need to be investigated for, some funny business with the agency. And it's funny, but at the end of the day, I mean, you can't really fault him. I mean, he's a great agent. Everyone wants to be signed by him. So Draymond Green even, so.
Yeah, I feel like CP3, wherever he plays next season, I just don't see it being with Phoenix, and it's going to be really interesting. If he goes to the Lakers, honestly, I think that's the odds-on favorite. I just don't see him being – there's no chance he's with Phoenix. If I had to bet money, I think it's definitely going to be the Lakers, but, who knows and stuff. There's still – I mean, the NBA season just ended a couple of days ago, but there's so many interesting stories – for next season. And that's the one thing I like about the NBA. There's so many stories about this player could be traded type of deal. What if he signs here? But, who knows, in the NBA. And kind of switching gears to the NFL just for a second. It was announced yesterday that the 49ers extended linebacker Fred Warner to a 5-year deal worth $95 million, 19 a year for a linebacker. To me, Fred Warner, obviously, to me, is a top 3 linebacker, but he's not the best. Darius Leonard from the Colts, in my opinion, is definitely the best linebacker in the league. And the one thing I will give San Francisco $19 million for a linebacker. If you're going to pay anybody on defense that much money, I think it should be a linebacker at position. Linebacker is your quarterback on defense, but $19 million is way too much money. Pay $4 or $5 more, you're going to get the best wide receiver in the whole NFL. Whether if you think that's Stephon Diggs, Michael Thomas, Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, whoever that is, and instead extending a linebacker 19. That's more than some starting quarterbacks who are not on rookie deals. That is crazy to me. Warner, I mean, he's their heart and soul of their defense when he's healthy. But this type of money for a linebacker is just absolutely insane. And something I did not think I would be saying, a linebacker is getting $19 million on a contract, 95 for 5 years. That's way, way, way too much. 15 to me is more like it. When you get closer to 20 for a linebacker, that's where we start to get in the crazy talk. To me, I understand signing him. I have no issue signing him. But with that much money, to me, that is not good at all for San Francisco.
And it's tough, right? Because you don't really want to discriminate against positions, right? So you don't want to say, okay, well, that position can't be paid X amount of dollars. But it's one of those things where Green Bay just signed Aaron Jones to an massive extension. And I was kind of upset. Here's why. You have A.J. Dillon, who's behind him, right? Who's making peanuts. I mean, they're expendable. I don't want to view them as just like pieces, right? But I mean, essentially that's what it is. It's a business, and you got 2 to 3, solid years of production. After that, it dwindles, and what happens? They get the boot out the door. But it's one of those things where are these teams getting this kind of money just to exhort those resources on one player? It's one of those things where obviously cap space and all these signing bonuses and all that, it's great, but it's one of those things where I would have focused. Here's me. I build inside out. The line's the most important. How are you going to keep your quarterback up, right? So they're lacking there. But to spend how much was it? $95 million on a linebacker. I mean, that's insane. That's insane. I mean, who the hell is running the show in San Francisco? I mean, is it Lynch? I mean, what are you doing? I mean, you saw how Garoppolo worked out. So, I mean, I'm not a fan of this signing. I thought it was silly, but I mean, hey, more to Warner though. He gets a bag. I mean, good for him. I'm happy for him. Him and his family set for life. So you really can't ask for more.
And you mentioned, kind of discriminating against other positions, but at the same time, you look at running back. Running back, pretty much everybody says it's the easiest position to play in the NFL for the most part. You mentioned Aaron Jones. To me, I thought that signing was absolutely horrible. The Packers do not have cap space. Why did you not re-sign Corey Linsley, in my opinion? Corey Linsley was the best center last season. You just drafted A.J. Dillon, who was, in my opinion, a very, very questionable pick early in the draft in 2020. Linsley's a top 5 offensive lineman. You got Bakhtiari, who's arguably the best tackle in the league. You have 2 of the best linemen at their own position. And re-signing Linsley could have definitely helped you with your case with Rodgers, but at the same time, this was before, the whole Aaron Rodgers, situation, everything like that. But I feel like this is just another reason why Rodgers would be upset, a guy he's had chemistry with and played with for quite some time, who has proven once and once again he's one of the best players in his own position. And instead you extend Aaron Jones like quite a bit of money more than I thought he would get. He's one of the better running backs, but I just said running backs are the easiest position to replace. A.J. Dillon is not going to get you the receiving yards like Aaron Jones would, but he's still going to get you quite a bit of rushing yards. To me, that was definitely one of the worst decisions in all of free agency. In the Chargers signing Corey Linsley, to me, honestly, it's the best signing in the whole free agency because the Chargers offensive line, me being a Bengals fan, I talked a lot to Bengals fans. I say, our offensive line was worse in the league. The Chargers offensive line last season was actually worse than the Bengals. And the fact that they get Corey Linsley, who was the best center last season, arguably the best offensive lineman in general last year, I think that is really going to help Herbert. And I know we're going to kind of getting off topic, but I just feel like that whole situation, not signing Linsley and signing Aaron Jones, because I did not think Aaron Jones was going to re-sign. I thought Miami was the team he was going to, and they were going to re-sign Linsley. And after, re-signing Aaron Jones, they didn't have hardly any money to do anything with. You spend pretty much all your money on the easiest position to replace instead of getting the best offensive lineman at last season, arguably in the NFL. It's a very, very poor decision, in my opinion, by Green Bay.
Yeah, and a lot of poor decisions on Green Bay. You look at drafting Jordan Love, trading up to get him, and not informing Aaron Rodgers. That's where the rift started, and telling him to be quiet we run the front office, you go play quarterback. I mean, that's the beginning of the end right there. And I'm the only Packer fan that's going to say this. Maybe not. I don't know. I think Aaron Rodgers was in the right to decline that 2-year extension that would have kept him in Green Bay for 5 more years and made him the highest paid. Because it's not about the money. People forget. It's not about the money. It's about doing things the right way, and it's about putting the team in a position to win a championship. And Aaron Rodgers is 1-4 in NFC championship games. Unacceptable. He is the greatest generational talent at quarterback history, and you blew it. I mean, look at what Tom Brady's doing in Tampa Bay. I mean, he got a quarterback coach in Bruce Arians. They built the roster around him. Hey, Gronk, you want to come play? Hey, AB, we got a spot for you. And they already had Mike Evans. I mean, they built the offensive line for him. And not to mention the defense was tremendous. So if I'm Aaron Rodgers, yeah, I decline that contract because you take the money, right? You're damned if you do, damned if you don't, because look at what they just did. They just got rid of your center. That doesn't help your case at all. And not to mention, you're going to be with a rookie center, okay? And Devontae Adams might be out the door. Did you see what he said about Derek Carr?
I didn't see anything, no.
Yeah, so he said it would be a dream to play with Derek Carr for the Raiders. I mean, it's one of those things where it's happening in front of my eyes. I was grown up, to be a Green Bay Packer fan. My family's, from Iron Mountain, Michigan, so that's on the borderline of, Wisconsin. So, Green Bay all day, and I grew up in the Aaron Rodgers, era. So I'm a Rodgers ride or die, and to see them treat him like this, it's sick, and it shouldn't happen because this guy he's your franchise, and you guys just treat him like that. I mean, it goes to show why Brett Favre only won 1 ring, because the Green Bay Packers front office, they don't have an owner to answer to. Everything is kind of, GM, Brian Gutekunst and so on and so forth. But I mean, there's no structure. I mean, it goes to show. And Aaron Rodgers pissed because, hey, we've had, not to mention all those NFC championship games, except for the 49ers and Falcons games, the Seattle game and the Buccaneers game, winnable games. You should have won them, point blank period. So it's sad to see, man, because I'm a Green Bay diehard, but not only that, I'm an Aaron Rodgers ride or die. So just to see our quarterback be put in this position right now, I mean, it's terrible.
So, I mean, I was one of those guys who thought, Rodgers was going to play this season. But the more we get closer, to training camp in the regular season, the more I think, there's actually a chance, he might not play. I'm one of those guys, like, maybe this was a little blown out of proportion, kind of like how the Russell Wilson, situation several months ago. But, I mean, I just feel like this is just getting really, really interesting. And with, like, let's say if Rodgers doesn't play or if he threatens to retire, Devontae Adams, he's already, there's already rumors maybe he's going to leave. I think he only has a year or so left on his deal. Do you go ahead and trade him type of deal if Rodgers isn't going to play? Then all of a sudden, you've lost Corey Linsley, Devontae Adams, and Rodgers. You are absolutely screwed. I mean, there's nothing. I know you're going to get a ton of draft picks for Adams or Rodgers if you trade him. But I just cannot see Rodgers actually being traded type of deal. I see him retiring before I see him getting traded. Because I feel like Green Bay is one of those. I just think I don't think they're going to trade him. It's kind of a similar situation with the Bengals and Carson Palmer years ago. Carson Palmer, the Bengals drafted Andy Dalton. He said he was not going to play for them, and they traded him on the trade deadline, and they got a first and second round pick. To this day, that's one of the best trades in NFL history for the Bengals, but one of the worst trades in NFL history for the Raiders. They really looked into that one, and it was really on the trade deadline. That almost trade did not even happen. And with Rodgers, I feel like whatever you're going to have to trade a ton of picks for him. To me, the only 2 teams that make any sense are the Giants and the Broncos.
Yeah,
I can see him getting traded, but I still kind of see him possibly retiring before he's traded because I just do not think the Packers will end up trading him. It's crazy to see because 4 or 5 months ago, this is something we never thought we would end up saying.
And I don't think we would have seen this if Green Bay beats Tampa Bay and goes to the Super Bowl. Like, period.
Exactly.
And it's one of those things where it's like any, relationship or marriage, if the person doesn't love the other person anymore, let someone else, love you. Like, it's like Aaron Rodgers. If the Green Bay Packers don't want me anymore, let someone else have me that wants me. If the Broncos want me, let them have me. And it's one of those things where you can get Bradley Chubb, you can get Drew Lock, you can get so many pieces in return for it and make out with, robbery. Because if you get, let's say, 2 first-rounders, a second-round pick, Bradley Chubb, Drew Lock, that's highway robbery, man. Like, you gotta wait because Rodgers wasn't coming back anyway. So you got that for nothing. You got it for free. Or you let Rodgers walk for nothing. And that's where we are at because they came out, Frank Gutekunst, Mark Murphy said, we are not trading Aaron. We are not going to do it. And, what are you going to do about it?
And that trade example you just said, Bradley Chubb has 1 year in his contract, which I think that means it's more possible that he would be involved in a trade. Drew Lock, in my opinion, I think, last season, he was injured and was not really good. I honestly feel like he's one of the most overhated quarterbacks in the league. I think he has potential. But, you look at, maybe let's say you get Lock, Bradley Chubb, a first-round pick, and instead of another first-round pick, you get a guy like Courtland Sutton or KJ Hamler or something like that.
Yeah.
Then, you get more wide receiver depth. So in case you would lose Devontae Adams to a trade or something or free agency, you at least have that one guy to fall back on type of deal. But to me, it's like this whole situation is just absolutely nuts. It's one of those. It's kind of like Brady with going to the Buccaneers, and Peyton Manning going to the Broncos. This is a once in a lifetime quarterback, generation type of quarterback who could possibly go to another team. It's like Rodgers is one of those guys for years. You think, he's going to stay with that team for his whole career, and then this whole thing comes up, and it's just absolutely crazy.
And it happened so fast, just like Andrew Luck. Look what happened. He was forced to retire because his shoulder was shot. He was one of the best generational quarterback talents we had. Next to, I'd say Robert Griffin III as well, but look what happened with him. So these injuries catch up to these guys, and just like Peyton Manning with the neck and Brady with the ACL. It just happens, and that's something Rodgers is thinking about right now. Here's why. He's a very conscientious person. So he's going deep, and he's obviously newlywed with, I don't know how to pronounce her name, Shane Lee Woodley or something like that. I believe that's how you pronounce it. But, he has Jeopardy. He has, a new life. He has friends. He has aspirations outside of football. So for him to think, wow, one hit to the knee, I blow my ACL out, it happens. It happened to me too. And trust me, it's not a fun process to go to rehab and do it. So he might just say, you know what? You don't want to trade me? Fine. I'll retire, hang it up, and he'll be filthy rich. He doesn't need the Green Bay Packers money. Mind you, he's going to make money outside of that in entertainment and so on and so forth. So, as a Packer fan myself, though, I want them to put Jordan Love in. If you think this guy's the future, put him in the fire. See how he does. If you guys are talking all that, then let's see how he does. He's going to throw more interceptions in 2 to 3 games than Aaron Rodgers would in a whole season. So, I come off as arrogant in saying that, but no, you guys drafted him. You guys put Aaron Rodgers in this position, so you face the consequences. Put him out there. See how he does. He's not going to do so good. Trust me. He's still green, this guy. He's barely NFL ready. And I think a few other guys like Zach Wilson is more NFL ready than Jordan Love. That's just my opinion. But, it's one of those things where you look at the landscape of the NFL, you don't find those guys every day. You don't find a Patrick Mahomes. You don't find a Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers every day. It blows my mind. You don't know what you have until it's gone. That's for sure, man. That's crazy.
And if Jordan Love, let's say he starts 17 games for the Packers, he's going to throw more interceptions that season than Aaron Rodgers probably has the last 3 years because Rodgers never throws picks. And it's just crazy because the Jordan Love fascination just during the draft to me made no sense. There was a quarterback a couple years ago from Buffalo, Tyree Jackson. He's one of my favorite draft prospects of all time. He's very similar to Jordan Love. And he actually, Tyree Jackson went undrafted, and Jordan Love was a first-round pick. The fact that you trade up to get Jordan Love is crazy. The fact that you trade up, to me, I don't have an issue with trading up, but when it happened, to me, it was obvious. I mean, Patrick Queen, you just lost Blake Martinez to the Giants. You're going to get, your new starting linebacker. And then this happens, and it's one of those type of deals where you do something, you're going to get maybe some backlash for it, but this just goes way over your head. You get far more backlash than you can ever imagine. It can completely just blow up your team type of deal. And I mean, I feel like this honestly is one of the biggest storylines we've really ever seen in the NFL. A reigning NFL MVP, one of the best quarterbacks of all time, could possibly just retire because he's tired of his organization type of deal.
And I don't think he's necessarily tired of, his teammates, the fan base, the city of Green Bay. It's the front office. And I think what it was when he wanted to put his input and say, hey, I think you should hire this coach. They said, you don't make the decisions, we do. So they basically treated him like a kid. And he's been there longer than they have. I mean, that's insane to me. I mean, it blows. For people that say LeBron James has no input in the Lakers front office, that's bull. Because trust me, he does. You know it and I know it because he gets it how he wants it. His way or the highway. Just like Tom Brady. How do you think he got all his friends in Tampa Bay? He literally called his friends and said, hey, man, you want to play football? Let's go win a championship. Like, that's how it goes. And for people to say, oh, well, it's a structure of the front office and, players play and no. You know it and I know it. Players get their way more often than not. I mean, you don't think Michael Jordan had complete grip of that front office? I think so. Obviously, maybe the owners and, so on and so forth had a little bit more power. But let's be honest. I mean, Jordan got his way. Just like LeBron, just like Tom Brady. But Aaron Rodgers doesn't get his way because, he's a player and he needs to play. And, that's bull. I'm so sick and tired of that, man. It pisses me off because if you could just listen to the fans, I mean, could you imagine if the Bucks put Giannis Antetokounmpo in this situation?
It'd be crazy.
They wouldn't. But they put Aaron Rodgers in this position. And mind you, he's a part owner of the Milwaukee Bucks. So he's invested in that community. He's invested in that city, in that town, in that state. But you guys treat him like he's, like he's a piece of shit. Excuse my language, but I mean that's ridiculous, man. I'm going off a tangent because I rant about it because like it keeps me up at night. It drives me nuts because it's like we were one win away from a Super Bowl, and you guys are doing this now. I mean, mind you, any team Aaron Rodgers goes to, this is the most Super Bowl ready team. The Broncos would have to give up so much to get him that they wouldn't have anything there. The cupboards would be bare. I mean, you know what? You're right, man. Maybe Aaron Rodgers should just retire right off in the sunset. Forget about it. You won your Super Bowl ring, 3-time league MVP, best touchdown to interception ratio in league history. What more do you need to prove? I say he's top 5 quarterback all time, no doubt. Next to Montana, Brady, Elway, Marino. Marino's kind of like one of those things where he doesn't have a ring, so you kind of, but he's the greatest talent for sure. But Manning, but it's a shame that Eli Manning has more Super Bowl rings than Rodgers. That blows my mind because we all know Rodgers is light years ahead of Eli Manning. So, damn.
It's crazy because you mentioned the Super Bowl rings with Manning and Rodgers. Take away the Super Bowl rings from Manning and put him on a small market team like the Lions or the Bengals. Everybody thinks he would suck because he isn't exactly 500 winning percentage. His stats are pretty crappy for a possible future Hall of Famer. But this whole Aaron Rodgers situation, I don't think he necessarily should retire. I just think it's more likely that he retires and the Packers actually trading him type of deal. But earlier today on Good Morning Football, former Packer Mike Daniels, who's with the Bengals now, said that he would he expects to see Rodgers, probably at training camp. But to me, this is just so interesting. Kind of speaking, kind of changing the subject here for somebody who's been with a same team company for so long, possibly going to a different team company type of deal. Switching to AEW wrestling. Someone who does not know much about AEW wrestling in general, Daniel Bryan being with WWE for so long and signing with AEW, was reported by Pro Wrestling Insider and Ringside News. To me, this is a very comparable signing to Peyton Manning, being with the Colts for so long and going to the Broncos, kind of in a football analogy. To me, this is kind of one of those similar situations. Talking about the Aaron Rodgers situation, never thought we would end up saying this. Daniel Bryan was in the main event at WrestleMania this year, and one of the next times he's on TV, he's going to be with AEW. Brie Bella, his wife, who is a WWE wrestler, said in an interview several months ago that she plans on, wrestling, somewhat soon, and he still signs with AEW. To me, I was not a big Daniel Bryan fan in WWE, but this could really change pro wrestling in effect. Like the AEW versus WWE ratings war type of deal makes it so much more compelling and intriguing. This is arguably their biggest signing ever. To me, the only one that's debatable, well, I don't know. I would probably say this and Chris Jericho is probably a tie. But with Daniel Bryan, I mean, look at all the matches he could possibly have, like with Omega, Pac, who was Neville in WWE, maybe one of the Young Bucks, or whoever it may be. This is huge. I don't think anybody expected this. And, last week there was talks that could happen. The big event in September, he could possibly debut there. All of a sudden, a week later, it's already announced that he signed. This is just mind-boggling to me. Daniel Bryan's one of those type of guys we kind of talked about before the show, like a Big Show or Mark Henry, who's been with WWE for so long. You just cannot imagine him leaving a loyal company that he's been there for over a decade with, and going to a completely rival company. To me, I like this a lot because this is new product. This is something new we haven't seen. I started watching wrestling in 2014. So I didn't really know about the wars and everything from the 90s and everything, but signing up like this is the closest thing we're going to get to it from 20 years ago. This is absolutely crazy. I cannot wait for it. This is something though I definitely thought we'd never end up seeing, but I'm so glad we're going to end up seeing it though.
You're going to cringe, but yes, because Daniel Bryan is tremendous. I mean, next to CM Punk, he is the biggest free agent name on the market, right? And it really where we got the leaks from is he wasn't scheduled to release any WWE action figures. He wasn't scheduled to be, I believe, in the next 2K, right, for WWE. So it's one of those things where it was kind of a hint that he wasn't returning and he was just done with the WWE. Now, this is breaking news to me that he signed with AEW because it was in the works when I was, picking up on the story. So, I'm glad that, AEW is bringing on these big names like Mark Henry, like Big Show, Cody Rhodes, Goldust. I mean, the list goes on. And not to mention, they're a little bit more, gore. They're a little bit more like R-rated because they show blood. They do more extreme, moves that the WWE have banned. And that's one of those things where going into the PG era, a lot of not only fans, but even wrestlers like The Undertaker upset that the WWE got soft. So AEW is kind of this fresh blood that's, a rival to the WWE, and to sign ultimately one of the biggest stars, Daniel Bryan. I mean, it's insane. No matter how they wrote the script to go, I mean, the fans would just overthrow it and they would take the show, So it's one of those things where I'm happy for him. But if AEW can sign CM Punk, that's mega. I mean, that's the biggest W of 2021.
And I mentioned, Peyton Manning, this is a similar situation going to the Broncos, going to AEW. Something else, with that neck injury with Peyton Manning, some people thought he maybe should have retired. Daniel Bryan actually retired due to, injuries because, he was severely injured and everything. And this is crazy. Daniel Bryan, Chris Jericho, Kenny Omega, Cody Rhodes. I mean, you really look at it, the past decade, I would say Daniel Bryan's right around the top 5 biggest wrestlers, like full-time wrestlers in the past decade. Randy Orton, when he was full-time, obviously Cena. Jericho, I would say, is up there. I mean, Roman Reigns is up there. Like, the fact that AEW has 2 of those guys is absolutely crazy. And you mentioned CM Punk, and that's going to be the last topic. CM Punk to AEW, I read some stuff. This is supposedly the closest and the most realistic rumor to date that CM Punk could go to AEW. This is honestly, I don't know much about CM Punk because, like I said, I started watching wrestling in 2014, and he retired just 2 or 3 months before I started watching. So, what are your thoughts on this whole situation?
I'm a fan. I'm actually like a kid in a candy shop seeing these stars, resurrect their careers. And, CM Punk's just a huge household name. Obviously, he went to mixed martial arts at UFC, fought, I believe it was Mickey Gall, if I'm not mistaken, got rocked. I mean, it's one of those things where he just belongs in pro wrestling. It's just it didn't feel right when he left WWE, and we know why he did. But it's one of those things because the WWE didn't know what they had. They were letting him, wrestle with staph infections. They were letting him wrestle just broken down body. And, it goes for every wrestler. I was just watching a thing where Kurt Angle told Vince McMahon to fire him in 2006 because he had like a torn everything. He was battered and beaten, and, he was on painkillers and threatening Vince McMahon. So, I mean, it got to that point for CM Punk as well. I mean, he felt like mistreated, and being one of those big stars. I mean, I hope that AEW knows what they're doing with this, because hopefully they can do a long-term storyline where it's not just, like McMahon, one night before Raw, he just changes the entire script, or even backstage 30 minutes before the show starts, he's just like, you know what, scrap it. I mean, yes, it's his company, but it's one of those things where maybe Stephanie McMahon and Triple H need to step in and say, you know what, we need to do the daily operations, just kind of like, Jerry Jones' son, Stephen Jones, does. Like, you can be the face, but we need to do the daily operations, because it just, it doesn't look good on the company. And especially with all these, cuts to their, digital teams. And like, I believe they cut like a bunch of production, like in the UK. I mean, it's one of those strange things where it's like they're ready to gear up to sell the company. Like they just released a whole bunch of big names, and one of the big names is slipping me that they released, but I was shocked. I don't know if you know, but
Braun Strowman.
Braun Strowman. They released him, and I was shocked because wow, like that's Braun. Like, are you serious? Like, so I mean, it's interesting to see where it goes, man.
So you mentioned Strowman. I wasn't really much of a fan of him, though. I never got the really hype around him. But he got fired 2 weeks before. He got fired 2 weeks after he was in a WWE title match, and the main match in the pay-per-view. To me, that's just absolutely crazy. Yeah. And I really feel like, watching some of CM Punk's promos. I mean, the great stuff he can do in like a PG era type of deal. Imagine, you just said AEW is a lot more edgy, which it is. Imagine what he can do in a much more, open-minded, freestyle type of promos in AEW. CM Punk versus Kenny Omega has Match of the Year written all over it. I mean, so does Daniel Bryan and Kenny Omega. Yeah. But, I feel like, AEW would probably know what they're doing. But at the same time, having CM Punk and Daniel Bryan possibly both debuting within a couple of months of each other, I feel like you have to do that perfectly type of deal, because you have a lot more pressure on there. And something else, I've seen people say, oh, CM Punk, he's older. Whatever. He's 42 years old. Honestly, I thought he was older than that. He's younger than John Cena. He's 3 years younger than Bobby Lashley. I did not realize Bobby Lashley was that old. He's younger than AJ Styles. But it's like CM Punk is that one. He's one of those guys like, the past couple of years in wrestling, it's like you hear about him. He's one of those guys, oh, he's never going to come back. He's never going to come back. But this being the most realistic chance and most real rumor that there is of him coming back, add that with Daniel Bryan. I'm going to sound crazy. Bold prediction. If CM Punk signs with AEW, and if this Daniel Bryan, signing is officially true, by next year, AEW Dynamite will at least have one episode that they have more viewers than Monday Night Raw. I know that kind of sounds kind of crazy, but it is kind of crazy because, when AEW first started, I don't think many people expected them to be like this, big type of deal. Some people are saying, oh, it's a t-shirt company. They'll be out within 2 or 3 years. Yeah. Their ratings have gone down some. Last week they had one of the best ratings ever. But then, people are starting to not watch, and then you get Daniel Bryan and possibly CM Punk, all out. That's their next pay-per-view. That's in Chicago, and every single time they're in Chicago, all the fans, whether it's at a WWE or AEW event, they always chant CM Punk because, maybe he's going to show up there, and everybody knows it's not going to happen. But now the chance it actually might happen. It's really crazy. And you also mentioned with WWE and like all the firings they're having, cutting people and everything like that. I feel like this is the, what it's the point. Like CM Punk, it's the most realistic chance he could sign somewhere. This is also the most realistic chance, and I think the closest we've ever seen WWE to possibly sell Vince McMahon selling WWE to maybe a company like Disney or something like that.
Yeah.
If CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, if both of those, end up officially signing with AEW, this is completely changes pro wrestling itself. Neither one of those guys. These are the two biggest free agents in WWE. I'm not going to say Brock Lesnar because he's one of those guys who will never come to AEW. He's just in it for the paycheck. He's just in it for the paycheck for WWE type of deal. But it's like, Daniel Bryan and CM Punk, more so Daniel Bryan, he's kind of been on those like indie, wrestling, kind of like an independence, like how Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks got so big. And, I saw a very interesting video, it was posted from a couple years ago, but it was Daniel Bryan not even trying to, basically predicting that AEW would happen in that way. It was just crazy in the fact that, that he apparently has signed there, and now CM Punk could be next. This is so crazy. And, I kind of said earlier, I started watching wrestling in 2014, but my favorite years were 16 and 17 with Jericho and Owens together, and the Cena and Reigns feud. Those type of things to me were my favorites. But, if we get this in a much more edgier product than WWE has ever been the past decade, this might be the most interesting wrestling. And, with Cena back too, even go back to WWE. We're going to have both, more than likely, great wrestling in AEW and WWE. And honestly, at the same time, that's never happened before. So, there's like so many possibilities with the matches and everything. I really hope he signs because I've never got to see him, actually watching. But, this could literally change the landscape of pro wrestling itself, in my opinion.
Yeah. And, I just think with the return of Edge and, like Jeff Hardy and WWE resurrecting those careers, it's just going to be like a fight for the ratings at that point. And I think AEW airs a little bit later, right? If I'm not mistaken, right?
It's on Wednesdays at 8.
Okay. So they're going to get more screen time. I've been kind of like in and out of this, but I think that they are going to sign a new TV deal with a new, station. So it's going to be interesting. But you mentioned that maybe Disney could buy WWE. Now, if I was Vince McMahon, I would learn a lesson from that, because if he still wanted to have his input in the WWE and say, hey, I think this storyline would work, just look at what Disney did to George Lucas in Star Wars. They bought it in 2012 for $4 billion, and they kind of told George Lucas, hey, we'll buy your story plots, but we're not contracted to abide by those. Like, we don't have to listen to you, basically. And they're like, we'll buy the scripts, but we're not going to use them. And George Lucas got upset because he's like, hey, you're ruining my vision. Star Wars is mine. Like, this is what I created in my head, and you guys are ruining, the story. And it's one of those things where he felt betrayed because he thought that they basically paid him money to shut him up, to say, okay, here, George, here's $4 billion. We'll buy your script. Just shut up. We'll do the big business. And that kind of pissed him off because he's like, hey, man, like, this is from the 70s, man. Like this is, obviously A New Hope and going on to like Revenge of the Sith. That's all George Lucas. I mean, that's all George. And for them just to do the sequels like that, I mean, if I was Vince McMahon and you still wanted to have input in your company, don't sell it because Disney will absolutely butcher it. I mean, yeah, they did a great job, but they just messed up so much, and especially bringing on Ryan Johnson, it was just terrible. I mean, hopefully they could do great things with like the Ahsoka show and Obi-Wan and season 3 of the Mando, but it's one of those things where that's what happens when you get big corporation like Amazon or Tesla or Starbucks. I mean, they just run they run a monopoly basically, and I don't want WWE to get in the hands of Disney, man, because then they have WWE and Star Wars, the two things I grew up on, and it's just like they're going to ruin it because like Vince McMahon and George Lucas always had input, always had control, and for them not to, I mean it defeats the purpose of it.
That is a very, very, good analogy. And it's like, let's say Disney buys WWE, but at the end of the week, WWE, and I mean, they're going to be on like Disney Plus or something like that. Disney will buy the rights, to the huge Peacock deal, right, with WWE Network Plus or whatever like that. But it's like, their product would be so much more babyish, and even the past couple of years it's already been, and the fact that it could actually get worse is just insane. And look at all the Star Wars like side shows type of deal, like you mentioned, The Mandalorian, Obi-Wan Kenobi, not to mention like all the Lego series, too. I mean, there's probably like 10, 15 like Star Wars shows Disney's make just within the past 5 years or so, and they would probably do that with WWE. And I feel like, if Vince McMahon and Triple H and all of them would sell, the WWE, I just really think right now, it looks like with everything going on, I feel like this is the most realistic opportunity. I don't think they necessarily should, because Vince McMahon and them, they don't need the money. I mean, they are billionaires. But like you said, they're going to basically ruin their legacy type of deal. And I feel like once WWE, like if they would ever sell, like if Vince McMahon ever sells WWE, it's over. And I'm not trying to be like, oh, AEW is better, but if Vince McMahon ever sells WWE, it's basically AEW until they ever run out. Because I mean, that's if Vince McMahon ever sells WWE, and especially to Disney, that's going to ruin wrestling pretty much as we know it, in my opinion, for the most part. It's going to have a thing we have seen for years and years and years, this top product, and all of a sudden it's going to ruin its legacy. Basically, how you're saying with Star Wars, New Hope, Revenge of the Sith, all those movies were really good, in the 80s and early 2000s. Years later, you try too hard, you just completely mess up on, and you ruin its legacy at itself, and it will make it look a shame for something that's been so good type of deal.
And it's kind of like you're selling out. Basically, it's like, what's more important, the money or your soul? I mean, George Lucas regrets it. I mean, he always talks about it. He says, I mean, it's almost 8 years since he sold Star Wars, and he always talks about it. He's like, I regret it because I used to watch, or I still do, but I used to watch these like, DVD extras on like Revenge of the Sith and Attack of the Clones and Phantom Menace, and those movies got so much hate, but George Lucas did a beautiful job of like articulating his imagination, and bringing in new worlds and new characters. And that's the thing that's missing with Disney. I mean, if they get a hold of WWE, who knows what they'll do with John Cena, Edge, Randy Orton, Rey Mysterio, these guys who've been in that company for 20, 30 years, you're just going to say, you know what, new ownership, new employees, or, how does that work? Because that's kind of what happened with George. I mean, yeah, he did get his revenge tour in episode 9 when, he was involved with that because Ryan Johnson just did a terrible job, and J.J. Abrams had to try his best to cover up all those mistakes. But even then, I mean, it's too late, so it's just, it's one of those things where I would have thought that maybe Vince McMahon would have kept it in his family, given it to Stephanie McMahon and Hunter, or even Shane, but I don't know why he's not. It could be like a personal thing where he's like, it's my company. I make the decisions. If I want to sell it, I get the money. Like, he's very egotistical too, and he's a narcissistic. So, I mean, it's very possible that that's his mindset for that, but we just have to wait and see, like I said, because that's all we can really do, because money talks at the end of the day. I mean, if someone came up to you right now and said, hey, man, would you sell me your name, like the rights to your name for like, X amount of dollars? Like LeBron James sold his name to like Nike for like his life. Like it's over. Like, like it's one of those things where it's kind of like money or your soul. So yeah, even for me, like I just think about it. Sorry to cut you off, but it's like going back to the Aaron Rodgers thing. He could have taken the money and been the highest paid quarterback, but it's not where his morals lie. He's more about doing things the right way. And I mean, people think that they're hurting for money. I mean, these guys are filthy rich. I mean, I don't know what people think. They're like, oh, $100 million. Yeah, but Aaron Rodgers already has all that. Like you're not giving him anything he doesn't already have. So that's one of those things where it's like, maybe he just wants to be an entrepreneur. Maybe he just wants to do his own thing,
And with, Vince McMahon, it could be one of those situations where, he knows the product the past year or so has for the most part sucked. And, he's too, old, stubborn guy who's just, too stubborn to give up on his product and give it to his son. I mean, his son or his daughter or whatever. But, the money talks deal. We've seen the WWE basically give up on their stuff. The Peacock deal, I don't remember how much. I think it was like $1 billion or 100 million, something stupid, like something Peacock should have never, ever offered. And it's like now, a perfect example. You mentioned with George Lucas selling to Disney, how they're going to take some of your product away. The Money in the Bank was the other night, and Charlotte flipped off the fans, and they like censored that or whatever. So it's like simple stuff like that. Like when you give money, like when you sell your stuff, it's not going to be anything like you imagine. Even like so much money like Peacock, even though you still, in a way, have a WWE network, they censor to take off some of the stuff to make it, basically babyish. I mean, if Peacock's doing that, I just cannot imagine what Disney would do with it. But I mean, I just feel like the whole Aaron Rodgers situation, the whole wrestling landscape right now is just so interesting. There's so many interesting, compelling storylines, and just so many sports right now with the NFL. Training camp coming up with everything. Yeah. It's like with Rodgers, with wrestling, with the NBA. With the free agency and the draft coming up next week. It's really, really interesting. We kind of talked about the Bucks winning the title. Is Giannis a top 5 player? What's next for CP3? What's next for Phoenix? The Fred Warner crazy deal in San Francisco. Daniel Bryan signing with AEW, shocking the wrestling world. And there are actual rumors that CM Punk can possibly sign with AEW. Yeah. So Tony, can you tell some of the listeners that can follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see if I can remember them. I think my main is Antonio W. Gazza. And then my sports page where I do updates and stuff, that's Tony Gazza TV. Both of those are on Instagram. I don't use Twitter, don't use Twitch, don't use TikTok, but you could find me on YouTube, Tony G TV. I did record a video last night. I'm not sure if I'm going to release it because, I'm very self-critical. So I'm like, it's good, but there's a few missing pieces. So I'm like George Lucas, man, I got to go back and fix those things. But, yeah, I mean, thank you for having me on, man. It's a pleasure. When I saw the text from you, I was like, oh, I was like, yeah, of course, man. Like, it would be an honor. So thank you for having me on. But is this going to be on all platforms or is this a stream only?
Yeah, this is on YouTube. It's going to be on Spotify as well.
Sweet. If you could you send me the links?
Yeah.
Awesome. I appreciate that, man. And it was a pleasure. But yeah, we should definitely catch up. And I don't know, where are you located?
Let me just 1 second here. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you all so much for listening. Follow me here on Instagram and Twitter as well. And I will see you all next time on the Sports 200.
Catch you next time.